I've lived in these Blue Ridge Mountains my whole life, born and raised in a little holler just outside of Floyd County, Virginia. My cabin sits back off a dirt road that twists through thick stands of oak and pine, the kind of place where the fog comes in so heavy some evenings you can't see 10 feet past your porch. It's peaceful most days, the way I like it. My wife, Clara, and our 2 kids usually fill the house with noise, her humming in the kitchen, the boys roughhousing in the yard. But that weekend in late November, they'd all gone down in North Carolina to visit her sister. First time in years, I'd been truly alone up here. I told myself it'd be fine, maybe even relaxing. A chance to read, split some firewood, just listen to the quiet. The first day passed easy enough. I chopped wood until my shoulders burned, fixed a loose board on the porch, and grilled a steak out back as the sun dropped behind the ridge. Night came quick, like it always does this time of year. By 8 o'clock, it was pitch black outside, the kind of dark that swallows everything. I built a fire in the stone hearth, poured a small glass of bourbon, and settled into the old leather chair with a book I'd been meaning to finish. The only sounds were the crackle of logs and the occasional pop from a chimney. It felt good, almost cozy. Around midnight, I just turned another page when I heard it. A soft thud overhead, then another, slow, deliberate, like someone stepping carefully across the shingles. My first thought was an animal. Raccoons get bold this time of year, or maybe a squirrel that had been living in the eaves. But the steps didn't scurry. They paused, shifted weight, and kept moving straight toward the peak above the living room. I sat frozen, listening. The roof isn't steep enough for anything to slide, and there wasn't any wind that night. Just cold, still air. The steps stopped directly over the fireplace. I stared up at the log beams, waiting for whatever it was to move on. Instead, I heard scratching. Slow, methodical scrapes coming down inside the flue, metal on metal like fingernails testing the damper plate. My stomach dropped. The chimney's narrow, lined with a steel insert we had put in a few years back after a burr got stuck. Nothing human could fit down there. Nothing should have been able to reach it from the roof without making a hell of a lot more noise. I set the book down quietly and reached for the iron poker leaning against the hearth. My heart was already hammering, but I told myself to stay calm. Probably just a branch caught in the cap, or ice forming weird. I killed the lamp, eased over to the window, and pulled the curtain back an inch. Fog pressed against the glass like a living thing, thick, gray, impossible to see through. No shapes, no movement, just that damp wall of mist. The scratching went on for maybe 5 minutes, then stopped as suddenly as it started. Silence rushed back in, heavier than before. I stood there with the poker in my hand until my arms ached, listening so hard my ears rang. Nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself it was over, banked the fire low, and went to bed, leaving the hallway light on like I used to do when the boys were little and afraid of the dark. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house, settling, felt like another footfall. Around 3 in the morning, I thought I heard it again. Fainter this time, almost like pacing, but when I sat up and listened, the night was dead quiet. I finally drifted off just before dawn. The next morning, the fog still hung low, turning the woods into ghosts. I brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint, then dragged the ladder out of the shed and climbed up to check the roof. The shingles were wet and cold under my hands, but there wasn't a single scuff mark, no broken twigs, no animal prints. The chimney cap was secure, screen intact. I even shone a flashlight down the flue. Clean, just soot and a little ash. Whatever I'd heard left no trace. I tried to shake it off. Spent the day outside, raking leaves that didn't need raking, anything to stay busy. By evening, I was tired enough to believe I'd imagined the whole thing. Clara called around supper time. Kids were having a blast. They'd stay an extra night, if that was okay. I told her sure, no problem, voice steady. After I hung up, the quiet settled back in like an unwanted guest. That second night, I kept the fire higher and left more lights on. I wasn't scared, I told myself, just cautious. Around 11:30, I was dozing in the chair when the first thud came again. Same spot, same slow rhythm. My eyes snapped open. This time the steps circled once, almost like whoever or whatever was getting the lay of the roof, then headed straight for the chimney. Scratch, pause, scratch. Longer this time. I could hear the metal flex faintly under the pressure. I didn't wait. I grabbed the poker, killed every light in the house, and stood in the dark living room, staring up. The fog outside glowed faintly from the moonlight, but still hid everything. The scratching went deeper, rhythmic, patient. It wasn't frantic like an animal trapped. It felt curious, like something testing how far it could reach. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually the noise stopped, and the steps retreated, slowly, the same way they'd come. I waited another hour before I dared move. When I finally went upstairs, I left the attic light on and wedged a chair under the bedroom door. Childish, maybe, but it helped me sleep. Sunday morning was clear for once, cold sunlight cutting through the bare trees. I checked the roof again, still nothing. No prints in the frost on the shingles, no debris. I even walked the perimeter of the house looking for ladder marks or disturbed leaves. Clean. I started to feel foolish, like maybe the isolation was getting to me more than I wanted to admit. Clara texted that afternoon. They'd be home by evening. Relief hit me harder than I expected. I cleaned the house top to bottom, built a fresh fire, and waited for the sound of tires on gravel. But as the sun dropped, the fog rolled in again, thicker than before. I kept glancing at the ceiling, half expecting those steps. They didn't come. My family pulled in around 7. The boys burst through the door yelling about cousins and candy, Clara laughing behind them. The house filled up with noise and warmth, and for a while everything felt normal. We ate supper, put the kids to bed, and sat by the fire talking until late. When we finally turned in, I left the upstairs hall light burning out of habit now. I woke sometime past midnight to silence, so complete it rang in my ears. Clara breathing soft beside me, the house settled. Then thud, thud, thud. Slow, deliberate steps crossing the roof, pausing above the chimney. The scratching started almost immediately, louder than before, metal groaning faintly. My blood went cold. Clara didn't stir. I lay there rigid, listening as it went on, longer than any night before. Finally, I couldn't take it. I slipped out of bed, grabbed the poker from downstairs, and stood in the dark hallway listening. The scratching stopped. Then came a new sound, soft, almost inaudible. A low exhale like breath against the damper. Warm air brushed my face from the floor vent near the bedroom door. The fireplace was downstairs, but the flue runs up through the wall, right beside our bed. I backed away slowly, heart slamming against my ribs. The steps started again, moving off toward the far edge of the roof. Then nothing. Complete silence. Morning came gray and wet. I checked the roof one last time before the kids woke up. Still no marks, no evidence. Clara asked why I looked so tired. I told her I hadn't slept well. We packed up the car that afternoon and drove down to her sister's for Thanksgiving after all. I haven't spent a full night alone in that cabin since. Sometimes when the fog rolls in thick and the house is quiet, I still hear it. Not every night, just when everyone else is gone or asleep deep enough not to notice. Soft steps overhead, pausing above the chimney. Patient, waiting. I'll leave lights on upstairs now, every light I can. And I never let the fire burn all the way down. Because whatever's up there, it only comes when it knows I'm alone. And one of these nights, I'm afraid the scratching might finally reach far enough. Let's move to story 2. I've always had a complicated relationship with my parents' old house up in the North Carolina side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's one of those places that feels like it's been sitting in the same holler since the Civil War, a 2-story wood frame farmhouse with peeling white paint and a tin roof that sings when it rains. The gravel driveway winds half a mile through thick pine and rhododendron before it spits you out at the clearing where the house stands. No streetlights, no close neighbors, just the mountains rising up on all sides and the constant whisper of wind through the trees. Growing up there, I couldn't wait to leave for college, but every time I came back, something about the quiet pulled at me. It was early fall of 2002 when they asked me to house sit for a week. Dad had finally saved enough to take Mom on the cruise they'd been talking about for years, some Caribbean thing with buffets and dance nights. I was 21 between semesters, working odd jobs in Asheville, so I figured why not? Free place to stay, peace and quiet, maybe get some reading done. I packed a duffel bag, a stack of paperbacks, and my old portable TV with rabbit ears, and drove up the mountain on a Thursday afternoon. The first couple of days were exactly what I expected. I slept late, made coffee on the ancient percolator, wandered down to the creek behind the house to skip stones. The basement door stayed closed most of the time. I only went down once to check the furnace filter and grab a box of Christmas decorations Mom wanted me to bring up for sorting. It's an unfinished space, low ceiling, dirt floor in parts, stone walls sweating with damp. Smells like earth and old coal dust. Nothing down there but shelves of canned goods, holiday boxes, and Dad's tools. I flicked the single bulb on, did what I needed, and came back up without a second thought. That first evening alone, I decided to cook something real instead of microwave junk. Fried up some cube steak and onions, boiled potatoes, the whole deal. The kitchen faces the back of the house. Window over the sink looking out toward the woods. Sun was dropping fast, painting everything orange through the trees. I had the radio on low, some classic rock station that faded in and out with the mountains, and I was humming along when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. Not from the front door or the back. From below. Like someone standing at the bottom of the basement stairs, rapping on the inside of the door with their knuckles. Knock, knock, knock. Deliberate. Evenly spaced. I turned the burner down and stood still, listening. The house makes noises, pipes clank, beams creak, but this was different. Clear as a bell. I figured maybe a branch had fallen against the foundation or something shifted on a shelf. I opened the basement door, reached around the corner, flipped the light switch. The bulb flickered once and steadied. Stairs disappearing down into the dim. Nothing moved. No sound. I called down anyway. Hello. Feeling stupid the second the word left my mouth. Silence. I closed the door, latched it, and went back to dinner. That night, I watched a movie on the little TV in the living room. Volume up louder than necessary to fill the empty rooms. Went to bed around midnight. Read for a bit under the quilt Mom made when I was a kid. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. I drifted off thinking about how nice it was to have the place to myself. Around 2 in the morning, I woke straight up, heart already racing for no reason I could name. The house was dead, quiet except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then it came again, knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same spot. Louder this time, like the person on the other side of the door had moved closer to it. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, every muscle tight. It kept going, 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. Patient, not frantic, like someone who knew I was up there listening and wasn't in any hurry. I didn't go downstairs. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a groundhog that had burrowed under the foundation, banging around, or water hammer in the pipes. Anything but what my mind kept circling back to. Someone down there waiting for me to open the door. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I must have dozed off again because the next thing I knew, gray morning light was leaking through the curtains. I drank coffee on the porch that day, watching mist burn off the ridge. Told myself I'd overreacted. Old houses make strange sounds. That's all. I even went down to the basement in daylight, flashlight in hand, looking for anything out of place. Shelves were undisturbed. No animal droppings, no signs of entry. The small ground-level window was still boarded over from when Dad stored his lawnmower down there. Everything exactly as I'd left it. The third night was clear and cold, stars sharp overhead. I made a fire in the living room hearth to take the chill off and settled in with a book. Around 10 o'clock, the knocking started again. Only now it wasn't 3 knocks. It was a pattern. 3 slow, pause, 2 quick, pause, 3 slow again. Like a signal. I muted the TV and sat listening, goose flesh rising on my arms. It went on for 10 minutes, maybe more, then stopped as suddenly as it began. I couldn't pretend anymore. I dragged the heavy oak chair from the dining room and wedged it under the basement doorknob. Felt ridiculous doing it, but it helped me sleep. Barely. By the 4th night, I was jumping at every creak. I'd taken to leaving lights on downstairs. Radio playing soft through the night. Didn't help. The knocks came later this time, closer to 3 a.m., and they were heavier. Not frantic, still patient, but insistent. Like whoever was down there had decided I wasn't going to answer and was making their displeasure known. I sat up in bed with the covers pulled to my chin, listening to that steady rhythm travel through the floorboards. At one point it changed. Long pauses between sets, almost like the person was resting. Then it would start again, stronger. I started talking to myself out loud, just to hear a human voice. Told myself one more day, and Mom and Dad would be home. I could make it. But the truth was I was scared in a way I hadn't been since I was a little kid, convinced something lived under my bed. The fifth night, the last full night before they were due back, was the worst. I'd barely slept all week, eyes burning, nerves raw. I tried to stay up late watching late-night talk shows, anything to delay going to bed. Around 1:30, I finally gave in, turned everything off except the hall light, and crawled under the covers. The house settled into that deep mountain silence where you can hear your own pulse. I don't know how long I lay there before the knocking started, but when it did, it wasn't knocking anymore. It was pounding. Heavy, deliberate blows against the inside of the door that rattled the frame. Not wild or crazy, still controlled, but urgent now. Like someone who'd waited long enough and was done asking politely. The chair I'd wedged under the knob scraped across the floor an inch at a time with every impact. I grabbed the phone, cordless, thank God, and dialed my buddy Travis, who lived 20 minutes down the mountain. Whispered what was happening, voice shaking so bad I could barely get the words out. He didn't laugh or question it. Just said, "I'm on my way." The pounding kept up the whole time I was on the phone, steady, unhurried. When Travis pulled into the driveway, 30 minutes later, headlights cutting through the dark, it stopped instantly. Mid-thump. We sat up the rest of the night in the living room with every light in the house burning, shotguns across our laps that we didn't really know how to use. Didn't hear another sound from the basement. Travis left at dawn when my parents' car crunched up the gravel. Mom and Dad came in laughing about shipped food and sunburns, suitcases thumping on the porch. I helped carry things in, told them everything had been fine. Didn't mention the chair, still wedged under the basement door, or the dark circles under my eyes. They never brought up anything strange about the house, and I never asked. I drove back to Asheville that same afternoon. Haven't spent a single night in that house alone since. When holidays roll around and they ask me to come up, I always make sure someone else is staying too. Because sometimes when I'm back visiting and the conversation dies down late at night, I catch myself listening for it. That patient, measured knock from below. And part of me knows that whatever's down there is still waiting. Still listening for the sound of only one set of footsteps upstairs before it starts again. Let's move to story 3. I've lived in this old wood frame house on a ridge in the North Georgia Blue Ridge Mountains for going on 15 years now. It was my grandfather's place originally, passed down to my dad, and then to me when he got too old to keep up the steep driveway in winter. The house sits high enough that on clear days you can see layers of ridges rolling out like blue waves all the way to South Carolina. But most days the clouds hang low and the mist clings to the laurels and pines that crowd right up to the siding. The walls are thin pine boards with newspaper insulation from the 1940s, and when the wind blows hard they creak and pop like the whole place is talking to itself. My wife, Sarah, and our 2 girls love it up here in summer. But come winter, they usually head down to her parents' place in Atlanta for a long weekend to escape the cold and the spotty cell service. That particular February, they left on a Thursday morning, kissing me goodbye on the porch while snow flurries swirled around us. I waved until the car disappeared down the switchbacks, then went back inside to the sudden, heavy quiet. The first day alone was peaceful in that way only mountain folks really understand. I split a rick of oak I'd had delivered the week before, the axe bites echoing sharp across the hollow. Built a fire in the cast iron stove that heats the whole downstairs, made a pot of chili thick enough to stand spoon in, and settled into the evening with an old western on the TV. The girls had left the house warm with their laughter, and I could still smell Sarah's coffee in the air. I went to bed early, tired from the wood splitting, and slept hard under the heavy quilts without dreaming. It was the second night when things started feeling off. I'd banked the stove low and gone upstairs around 10. The house already cooling fast now that the fire wasn't being fed. Our bedroom is at the back corner, one wall facing the hallway and the girls' rooms, the other an exterior wall that looks straight out into the dark woods. I was lying there half asleep, listening to the wind moan through the eaves, when I heard it, soft voices. Low, murmured conversation filtering through the wall, like someone was in the next room having a hushed argument. At first I thought Sarah had come home early, and I'd slept through the car pulling up, but then I remembered she'd taken the only set of keys that worked in the sticky front door lock. I sat up slowly, heart picking up speed. The voices were indistinct, overlapping, almost like two people speaking at once in a language that wasn't quite English. The cadence rose and fell, urgent but controlled, the way folks talk when they don't want to wake someone sleeping nearby. I eased out of bed, bare feet cold on the pine floor, and walked over to the wall. The boards were icy to the touch. I pressed my ear against them, holding my breath. The whispering stopped the instant my skin made contact, as if whoever was speaking had heard me move. I stood there for a long minute, listening to nothing but my own pulse. Eventually, I chalked it up to the wind, pushing through some crack I hadn't noticed before, or maybe ice forming in the gutters making odd sounds. I crawled back under the covers and told myself I was just missing the usual nighttime noises of the girls giggling down the hall, or Sarah turning pages in her book. Sleep came fitful after that. I'd drift off and then jerk awake, certain I'd heard the murmurs start again, only to find silence. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up, pulled on socks and a flannel, and went downstairs to stoke the fire back to life. The house felt bigger in the dark, emptier. I sat in the rocker by the stove until gray light started leaking through the windows, then brewed coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. That day I kept busy to shake the unease. I shoveled the light snow off the porch, checked the generator fuel, even climbed into the attic to look for signs of animals nesting in the insulation. Found nothing but mouse droppings from last fall and a few loose shingles I need to fix come spring. Crawled under the house too, flashlight beam cutting through cobwebs and damp earth. No holes big enough for anything larger than a squirrel, no disturbed dirt. By late afternoon, I was convinced I'd imagined the whole thing. Cabin fever setting in early because of the isolation. The third night, the whispers came back clearer. I was reading in bed, lamp casting a warm circle on the quilt when they started up again. Same wall, same low overlapping voices. This time I didn't move right away. I lay still and listened, trying to make sense of the sounds. The arguments seemed to ebb and flow, one voice pleading, the other sharp and insistent. Then, clear as anything, a single word cut through the murmur, "Stay." It was spoken in English, soft but deliberate, like a warning or an invitation. I couldn't tell which. My skin prickled. I sat up slowly and said aloud, "Who's there?" My voice sounded small in the empty room. The whispering stopped instantly again. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall once more. Nothing. I even tapped the boards lightly with my knuckles, listening for a hollow spot or some echo that might explain it. Solid wood and insulation. I opened the window a crack, letting in a blast of frigid air, and leaned out into the night. Snow had started falling again, big silent flakes drifting through the porch light's glow. The woods were black and still, no tracks visible in the fresh layer on the ground. I closed the window, latched it tight, and paced the bedroom for a while before forcing myself back to bed. I left the lamp on low and eventually dozed, but the whispers threaded through my dreams, fragments of conversation I couldn't quite grasp. Sunday morning, I woke to a world muffled under 6 inches of new snow. The quiet was absolute, the kind that presses in on your ears. I made breakfast, then bundled up and walked the property line, looking for anything out of place. Found a few deer tracks near the creek, nothing else. The exterior wall of the bedroom showed no gaps, no signs anyone had been near the house. I even climbed the extension ladder and checked the eaves for ice dams that might be channeling sound weirdly. Everything looked normal. By evening, I was almost convinced the mountain air and solitude were playing tricks on my mind, the way they sometimes do when you're up here too long without other voices. That final night, the night before Sarah and the girls were due back, I barely slept at all. I kept every light in the house burning and the stove cranked high, telling myself it was just to keep the pipes from freezing. Around midnight, the whispers started again, stronger than before. They rose and fell in that same urgent rhythm, words blurring together. I sat on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands, listening despite myself. Another word came clear here. Then, after a long pause, "Stay here." The voices sounded almost sorrowful now, like someone trying to convince another to remain in a place they didn't want to be. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the Big Mag light from the nightstand and went downstairs, opened the back door, and stepped out onto the porch in just my socks and flannel. The cold hit like a slap, snow already dusting my shoulders. I shone the beam into the tree line, sweeping slowly back and forth. Nothing moved. No eyes reflected back. No shapes detached from the trunks. Just falling snow and darkness. I called out once, "If someone's out there, show yourself." And my voice fell dead against the trees. When I went back inside, boots dripping meltwater on the floorboards, the whispers had stopped. The house felt watchful, waiting. I sat up in the living room until dawn, dozing in the rocker with the light on. The crunch of tires on snow woke me mid-morning. Sarah's SUV nosing carefully up the driveway. The girls spilled out yelling about Grandma's cookies and presents, and Sarah hugged me tight, saying how much she'd missed the quiet up here. The house filled with their voices, their footsteps, their life. The whispers never came back after that. Not once in all the years since. We've had plenty of weekends with the whole family, holidays, storms that knock power out for days. Normal mountain living. But I've never forgotten those few nights alone, the way those voices seemed to come from inside the wall and outside in the woods at the same time. I catch myself sometimes when the house is quiet, ear cocked toward that back bedroom wall, wondering if whatever was speaking ever found someone else willing to stay and listen. And on the rare nights when Sarah takes the girls down to visit her folks without me, I make sure to sleep downstairs on the couch with the stove roaring and every light blazing. Because deep down, I know those voices weren't talking to each other. They were talking to me, begging me, or warning me to stay. And I still don't know which scares me more. Story 4. I grew up in a quiet little hollow deep in the Tennessee side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The kind of place where the road ends at a rusty gate and the morning fog pools so thick you can't see the mailbox from the porch. Our house was a plain 2-story farmhouse built by my great-grandfather back in the 30s. White clapboard gone gray with age, tin roof that rattled in the wind, and a narrow attic pulled down tucked into the upstairs hallway ceiling. The attic was mostly storage. Christmas decorations, old trunks of clothes, boxes of my dad's army stuff from Vietnam. We didn't go up there much. The ladder was stiff and squeaky, and the space smelled like dust and cedar. As a kid, I hated it, always convinced something was watching from the dark corners when I had to fetch something for Mom. I was 19 that summer, home from my first year of college in Knoxville, when my parents decided to take a 10-day cruise to Alaska, some retirement gift to themselves after years of saving. They'd never left me alone that long before, but I was old enough now, had a summer job at the lumber yard, and promised I'd keep the place standing. They flew out on a Tuesday morning, waving from the taxi at the end of the driveway until it vanished around the bend. I stood there a minute longer, listening to the sudden quiet settle in like a blanket. The cicadas were loud in the oaks, and somewhere down the hollow a dog barked once and stopped. It felt good at first, freedom, my own schedule, no one telling me to mow the lawn or turn the music down. The first few days passed easy. I worked mornings, came home hot and dusty, grilled burgers on the back porch, watched movies late into the night with the volume up. The house made its usual noises, beams creaking as the sun heated the roof, pipes knocking when I ran to shower, but nothing out of the ordinary. I'd grown up with those sounds. They were comforting in their own way. It was Thursday afternoon, maybe the 4th day alone, when I first heard the attic. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich, radio playing low, when that familiar long squeak cut through everything. The pull-down stairs unfolding. Slow, deliberate, like someone easing them down so the springs wouldn't snap. I froze with the mayonnaise knife in my hand. The sound stopped, then started again. Lower now, the ladder extending rung by rung. My stomach tightened. I'd been upstairs an hour earlier grabbing clean clothes, and the attic door had been closed tight. I knew that for a fact because I'd banged my head on the handle the day before and cursed it. I set the knife down and walked to the hallway, heart already picking up speed. The ladder was fully extended, swaying slightly, the square opening in the ceiling gaping like a dark mouth. Dust drifted down in lazy motes caught in the light from the window. I stood there staring up, waiting for a squirrel or raccoon to poke its head out, but nothing moved. The attic was silent. I called up anyway, "Hey, anybody up there?" Feeling foolish the second the words left my mouth. Only echo answered. I told myself it was a draft. These old houses shift, air pressure changes with the weather, and the latch probably wasn't catching right. I grabbed the cord, pulled the ladder up until it folded, and pushed the panel flush. It latched with a click. I even tugged on it twice to make sure. Then I went back to my sandwich, but I kept glancing at the ceiling the rest of the afternoon. That night, I put on an old action movie downstairs, volume loud enough to drown out any creaks. Around 10:30, halfway through a car chase, I heard it again. That long, slow squeak. My skin prickled. I muted the TV and sat dead still. The sound continued, steady, unhurried, until the ladder bottomed out with a soft thud against the runner board. Footsteps? No, just the mechanism. Had to be. I grabbed the big flashlight from the kitchen drawer and walked to the hallway. The ladder was down again, swaying faintly. But this time there were marks on the wooden rungs, dark smudges like bare feet that had walked through dirt or soot. 3 or 4 prints going up, faint but unmistakable. My mouth went dry. I shone the beam straight up into the opening. The light cut through floating dust and caught the rafters, the pink insulation sagging between them, boxes stacked along the far wall exactly where I'd left them last Christmas. Nothing moved. No eyes reflected back. Just shadows and silence. I didn't go up. I don't know why I didn't. I told myself later I should have, but something kept my feet planted on the floor. Instead, I yanked the ladder up fast, slammed the panel shut, and wrapped duct tape around the handle and frame 3 times until it felt secure. The tape made a loud rip with every pull, and I remember thinking if anything was up there, it sure knew I was spooked now. I left every light on upstairs and downstairs, cranked the TV volume back up, and tried to finish the movie. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I kept hearing soft thumps overhead, slow, measured like someone pacing the length of the attic and back. Not running, not frantic, just walking, thinking. The next morning the tape was still intact. I peeled it off carefully and pulled the ladder down myself. Climbed up with a flashlight and looked around in full daylight, streaming through the small gable vent. Nothing disturbed. The scuff marks were gone. Maybe I'd imagined them in the dim hallway light. The floorboards up there were dusty, but no fresh prints. I checked the roof access panel, nailed shut from the inside years ago after a leak. No way in or out except the pull down. I came back down, latched it again, and tried to laugh at myself. Old house, old nerves. But the thumping came every evening after that. Always around dusk, when the light started fading and the hollow filled with shadow. Soft footsteps overhead, pausing near the center, then pacing again. I'd sit downstairs pretending to read or watch TV, but really just listening, tracking the path by sound, back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes it would stop directly above wherever I was sitting, as if whatever was up there knew exactly where I stood. I started moving rooms randomly, testing it. Sure enough, the pacing would shift, stop overhead again. I never heard it during the day, only when the sun went down and the house grew quiet. By the 7th night, I was sleeping maybe 2 hours at a time. I'd taken to leaving the hallway light on and wedging a chair under the attic handle for extra measure. The thumps still came, muffled through the ceiling, patient as ever. I tried recording it on my flip phone, held it up to the ceiling, but playback caught nothing but faint static and my own breathing. I even drove into town one afternoon and bought heavy-duty latches at the hardware store, screwed them into the frame myself. Felt better for about an hour. The night before my parents were due back, the thumping started earlier, right after supper. I was washing dishes when it began, steady and deliberate. Then something new, a soft scrape, like a box being nudged aside. Another scrape, slow, methodical. Whatever was up there was moving things. I stood at the sink with soap running down my wrists, staring at the ceiling. The sound continued for maybe 20 minutes, then stopped. Silence pressed in heavier than before. I didn't sleep at all that night. Sat in the living room with every light blazing, shotgun across my lap that I didn't really know how to use beyond pointing and pulling. Watched the clock crawl toward morning. Around 5 a.m., I heard the long squeak again, slow descent. The chair I'd wedged scraped across the floor an inch, then stopped. Something testing the new latches. They held. The ladder stayed up. Eventually the trying stopped, and the thumping resumed. Faster now, almost agitated. It went on until the first gray light touched the windows, then cut off like a switch. My parents' car crunched up the gravel around noon. I met them on the porch, bags under my eyes, trying to act normal. Mom hugged me and said how quiet I looked. Dad clapped me on the shoulder, asked if the house had behaved. I helped carry suitcases in, chattering about work and the weather to keep from saying what I really wanted to. When we went upstairs to put things away, the duct tape I'd wrapped days earlier was torn clean through, hanging in ragged strips. The new latches were bent slightly outward. The ladder was halfway down, swaying gently, as if someone had just descended and walked away. Dad frowned, said old houses settle and the humidity would expands and contracts. Mom nodded, started unpacking. They never heard a thing the whole time they were home. I moved back to Knoxville 2 weeks later, got an apartment near campus. Told myself it was for school, but we all knew better. I still drive up to visit sometimes, holidays, birthdays. The house looks the same, smells the same, but I never stay overnight if I can help it. And when conversation lulls late in the evening, I catch myself listening for that soft thump overhead, the slow pacing that always seemed to know exactly where I was. Part of me wonders if whatever was up there got tired of waiting for me to come up and investigate. If it finally came down on its own the morning they returned, walked quietly through the house while I dozed on the couch, and went somewhere else. Or if it's still up there, patient as ever, listening for the sound of only one person moving around downstairs before it starts again. Story 5. I'd always dreamed of getting away from the noise of Richmond. Traffic, sirens, neighbors arguing through thin apartment walls. So when my girlfriend, Emily, got accepted into that 2-week training program up in Northern Virginia, I jumped at the chance to rent a cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Found the place online. A small A-frame off a gravel Forest Service road near Floyd, Virginia. The listing called it secluded, which was exactly what I wanted. Big windows on 3 sides, wraparound deck, surrounded by nothing but national forest. No close neighbors, no cell service half the time, just birdsong and wind in the pines. The owner met me with the keys, said the place had been in his family for generations, warned me about bears getting into trash, but otherwise smiled and left me to it. I carried my duffel and a couple grocery bags inside, stood on the deck breathing in that clean mountain air, and thought I'd finally found peace. The first few days were perfect. I worked remotely from the kitchen table, laptop facing the wall of glass that looked out over a steep drop-off into green. Sunlight poured in until late afternoon, and I'd take breaks to hike the faint trails behind the cabin, boots sinking into pine needles, the only sound my own breathing and the occasional rustle of a squirrel. Nights were warm that July, windows cracked open to let in the chorus of katydids and tree frogs. Emily texted when she could, short messages about hotel food and long classes, but mostly I was alone with the quiet, and I loved it. It was the 4th night when I first noticed something off. I'd stayed up later than usual, reading on the couch with a beer, the big living room window open to the dark. Around midnight, I got up to close the curtains, heavy burlap things that blocked the light pretty well. And as I reached for the cord, movement caught my eye outside. A tall shape, darker than the night around it, standing perfectly still just beyond the glass. Human height, maybe taller, thin, no details, just a black silhouette against the faint starlit trees. My hand froze on the curtain. I blinked hard, thinking it was a trick of the lamplight reflecting on the pane, or maybe a deer standing upright for a second. When I looked again, it was gone. Nothing there but swaying branches and darkness. I stood at the window a long minute, heart thumping louder than it should have. Told myself I was tired, I was playing games. Pulled the curtain shut, checked the door lock twice, and went to bed upstairs in the loft bedroom that overlooked the living room. The big window beside the bed had no curtains, just wooden blinds I'd left half open to watch the stars. I fell asleep listening to the insects outside. Later, I don't know what time, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up thirsty and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The side window over the sink faces the woods on the east side of the cabin, thick underbrush right up to the clearing. I was filling a glass when I felt it before I saw it. That prickling sense of being watched. I turned slowly, and there it was again. Same tall shadow, standing motionless just outside the glass. Closer this time, maybe 10 feet away. No features, no reflection. Just an absence of light in the shape of a person. It didn't move, didn't shift weight. Just stood there as if it had been waiting for me to come downstairs. I dropped the glass, shattered on the tile, water everywhere, but I barely registered it. I lunged for the light switch, flooding the porch and yard with the motion lights the owner had installed. The shadow vanished the instant the bulbs flared. I grabbed the broom handle from the corner like it was a weapon, yanked the door open, and stepped out onto the deck. Cool night air, smell of pine, and damp earth. The lights showed empty clearing, soft dirt around the foundation, a few scattered leaves. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to suggest anything heavier than a raccoon had been near the cabin. I cleaned up the glass with shaking hands, checked every window and door twice, then went back to bed, leaving the downstairs lights on. Sleep didn't come. I kept seeing that shape in my mind, the way it hadn't reacted to being spotted, just stood there patient. The next evening, I tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was a stag or shadows from the trees moving in wind I couldn't feel inside. I grilled steak on the deck, drank a couple beers, watched the sunset paint the ridges gold. But as soon as the light faded, that uneasy feeling crept back in. I closed all the curtains early, kept the outside lights on a timer so they'd stay bright until dawn. Around 10, I was in the kitchen making tea when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. At the back window this time, the one facing the steep hillside behind the cabin. I turned slowly. The shadow was there again. Same height, same stillness, standing just at the edge of where the porch light reached. Watching. I didn't approach the glass this time. Just backed away slowly until I hit the hallway, then ran upstairs and grabbed my phone. No signal, of course. I paced the loft, peering through slats in the blinds. Couldn't see it anymore. After an hour, I convinced myself it had moved on. Whatever it was. But it came back every night after that. Different windows, different times. Sometimes I'd spot it while watching TV. A dark shape suddenly framed against the glass like it had stepped into view the moment I looked away. Other times I'd feel the stare first, that heavy pressure on the back of my neck, and turn to find it waiting. Always silent. Always gone the second I moved toward the window or flipped on more lights. No footprints ever, even when the ground was soft from afternoon showers. No sounds, no breathing, no footsteps on the deck boards. Just presence. By the 7th night, I was barely sleeping. I'd taken to keeping every light in the cabin burning. Radio playing low, anything to fill the space. I'd stopped opening the curtains at all, but that only made it worse. Knowing it could be right outside, and I wouldn't see it coming. Around 2 in the morning, I woke to a new sound. Soft scratching on the glass beside my bed. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails testing the pain. My eyes snapped open. Moonlight filtered through the half-closed blinds, striping the room in silver and black. And there it was, closer than ever, pressed almost against the window upstairs. Tall enough that its head reached the top of the frame. No face, no hands visible. Just that void-black silhouette, unmoving except for the faint rhythm of the scratching. I didn't scream, didn't move. Just lay there rigid under the sheet, watching it watch me. The scratching went on for minutes, patient, exploring. Then it stopped. The shape lingered a moment longer, as if satisfied, before melting back into the night. I waited until the sky started lightening before I dared get out of bed. Packed my bag in under 10 minutes. Left the keys on the kitchen counter with a note saying family emergency. Drove down the mountain with the sun coming up behind me, hands shaking on the wheel. I broke the lease, lost the deposit, didn't care. Told Emily some half-truth about work calling me back early. The owner never asked questions, just mailed my stuff later. I still drive those mountain roads sometimes, but I stick to the parkway, avoid the back routes. And on quiet nights, when the apartment is dark and the windows reflect my own silhouette, I catch myself checking the glass for something taller standing just behind my reflection. I know it wasn't a bear or a prank or my imagination running wild. Whatever it was didn't want anything from me except to know I was alone and to make sure I felt it watching. Some nights, I wonder if it followed me down from the mountains, if it's still out there in the dark beyond the streetlights, waiting for the next time I'm truly by myself, because I get the feeling it isn't done with me yet. Story 6. Our family home sits down in a narrow valley on the North Carolina side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The kind of place where the ridges rise up steep on both sides and the sun doesn't hit the backyard until late morning. The house itself is old, built by my great-grandparents in the 20s, added on over the years until it rambled a bit, with creaky pine floors and a stone chimney that draws perfect when the wind's right. The back door is a heavy wooden thing painted green, open straight out onto a small porch that overlooks nothing but thick woods, rhododendron, oak, and pine sloping down toward a creek you can hear but rarely see. Growing up there, that door was always the one we used most. Out to the clothesline, out to the garden, out to fetch firewood from the stack under the eaves. I've locked and unlocked it thousands of times, always with the same ritual: deadbolt, chain if we remembered, and a good tug to make sure. That summer I was 28, working remotely for a tech company out of Charlotte, and when the whole family decided to drive to Missouri for a big reunion at my aunt's farm, I opted to stay behind. Deadlines were piling up, and I figured a week of pure quiet would do me good. No kids running through the house, no cousins dropping by unannounced, just me, the dog, and the mountains. My parents hesitated at first. They'd never left me completely alone in the house as an adult, but I promised I'd keep things tight, water the tomatoes, and call every evening. They left on a Saturday morning, car packed to the roof, waving out the windows until they rounded the bend. The dog, an old hound named Boone, stood beside me on the porch whining a little, and then it was just us. The first couple of days were exactly what I'd hoped for. I worked at the kitchen table with the back door propped open to let in the breeze. Boone sprawled in the sunspot on the floor. Evenings I grilled chicken or heated up leftovers, took long walks down the dirt track that follows the creek, and sat on the porch swing with a beer watching the fireflies come out. Nights were cool enough that I built small fires in the hearth, read until my eyes burned, then locked up careful front door, side door, and finally the back. Deadbolt turned, handle jiggled twice. Habit drilled into me since childhood. It was Tuesday morning when I came downstairs and found the back door standing wide open. Not cracked. Wide, the screen door pushed outward and flapping gently in the breeze that came up the valley. Boone was already outside, nosing around the yard, which wasn't like him. He usually waited for me to let him out. I stood there in my socks staring, coffee mug forgotten in my hand. I knew I'd locked it. I always did. I remembered the click of the deadbolt, the tug on the handle. Nothing looked disturbed inside. No muddy prints on the floor, no cabinets left open, no sign anyone had come through. I stepped out onto the porch, looked for tracks in the soft dirt around the steps. Nothing but Boone's paw prints and a few scattered leaves. I called him in, closed the door, locked it again, maybe harder than necessary, and tried to shake the unease. Probably the old would swelled in the humidity, I told myself. Or I'd only thought I'd locked it. Easy mistake when you're half asleep. That night, I was extra careful. Double-checked every window, turned the deadbolt slow so I could feel its seat, even slid the little chain across for good measure. Went to bed around 11. Boone curled up at the foot like always. I woke once around 2 to the sound of him growling low in his throat, but when I sat up he'd settled again, head on his paws, staring toward the hallway. I figured a possum or a coon outside, drifted back off. Around 3 a.m. I came wide awake to a sound I knew instantly. The soft metallic click of the deadbolt turning back. Then the slow, familiar creak of the hinges as the door eased open. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept under the bed, slipped downstairs barefoot, moving as quiet as I could on the creaky steps. Boone stayed upstairs, whining softly. I reached the kitchen doorway and stopped. The back door was closed. Locked, chain still across. The porch light showed empty boards outside, screen door shut tight. No breeze, no movement. I stood there a long minute, bat raised, listening to my own breathing. Eventually I checked the handle. Solid. Deadbolt thrown. I even opened it myself, stepped out with the bat, swept the flashlight beam across the yard and into the tree line. Nothing. Closed and locked again, chain slid home. Morning came gray and misty. I drank coffee on the porch watching fog drift through the trees, trying to laugh it off as a dream. But when I went inside to refill my mug, the door was open again, same as before, screen flapping lazy in the damp air. Boone trotted out like it was normal. No tracks, no missing food, no sign anyone or anything had come inside. I started feeling the isolation then, real and heavy, the way the mountains can press in when you're the only human voice for miles. I drove into town that afternoon, 30 minutes down winding roads to the little hardware store in Spruce Pine, and bought a heavy slide bolt and a rubber or doorstop wedge thick enough to hold a bank vault. Installed the bolt high up where you'd need reach to work it, hammered the wedge under the door that night until it wouldn't budge. Told myself that would settle it. It didn't. The next morning the wedge was kicked aside into the corner, the new bolt slid open, the door standing wide again. I started leaving lights on at night. Porch light, kitchen light, hallway. Began checking the locks obsessively every time I passed the door. The faint noises started then. Soft thumps on the porch boards after dark, like someone testing their weight before stepping fully on. A rustle in the leaves just beyond the light's reach. Once a low scrape along the siding near the door, slow and deliberate. Boone would growl toward the back of the house, hackles up, but never barked outright, just watched, ears forward. By the fifth night, I wasn't sleeping much. I worked with my back to the wall, so I could see the door, kept the back close, drank too much coffee. Around 1 in the morning, I heard the handle turn. Slow, testing, metal on metal. Then the faint push against the frame, pressure that made the wedge squeak a fraction across the floor before it stopped. I sat frozen at the table, laptop forgotten, watching the door tremble almost imperceptibly. It didn't open. Whatever was out there tried for maybe 5 minutes, patient, then went quiet. The last night, the night before my family was due back, I decided I wasn't going to let it win. I turned off all the lights early, sat in the dark living room with the bat across my lap, and a clear view of the back door through the kitchen. Boone lay beside my chair, head up alert. I waited. Hours passed in that thick mountain silence where every small sound feels huge. Around 2:30 I heard it. Soft footsteps on the porch boards. Barely there at first, like someone placing weight carefully, avoiding the creaky spots my dad still hadn't fixed. They moved along the length of the porch, paused outside the door. Then the handle turned, slow, deliberate. The wedge scraped. The chain rattled faintly. Pressure built against the door, steady, not frantic. I could hear breathing now low, even right on the other side of the wood. I stood up, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat, and shouted, "Get out of here!" My voice cracked, but it carried in the quiet. The pressure stopped instantly. Footsteps retreated, soft, unhurried, down the steps and across the dirt. I waited 10 minutes, then flipped on every light, checked the locks. Everything held. Doors still closed. No marks on the handle, no prints in the dew-wet dirt. My family pulled in the next afternoon, tired and happy, car full of stories and leftovers from the reunion. I helped unload, hugged everyone tighter than usual, told them work had gone fine. Never mentioned the door, the noises, the nights I'd barely slept. They haven't brought it up either. The back door stays locked now, chain and wedge and deadbolt every night, even when the whole house is full. Boone passed a couple years ago, but sometimes when I'm visiting and the conversation dies down late, I catch myself listening for those careful footsteps on the porch, the soft turn of the handle that never quite opens it. Whatever was out there never forced its way in. It didn't need to. It just wanted me to know it could have, any night I was alone. In some quiet evenings, when the fog rolls up the valley and the woods go still, I wonder if it's still waiting out there in the dark, patient as ever, for the next time the house goes quiet and only one person's footsteps echo inside. Story 7. Our little house sits high on a ridge in the North Georgia Blue Ridge Mountains, tucked back on a dirt road that climbs steep and narrow through laurel thickets before it finally levels out at our clearing. You can stand on the front porch and see nothing but layers of blue-green ridges fading into the haze, with no other rooftops in sight. Nights up here are something else. quiet in a way that city folks can't really understand. No highway hum, no neighbors' TVs bleeding through walls. Just wind in the pines, the occasional hoot of a barred owl, and the distant rush of the creek down in the hollow. My husband, Travis, and our boy, Caleb, who was 8 at the time, loved heading out on camping trips with a couple of his buddies from work. They'd pack tents and fishing gear into the truck and disappear into the Chattahoochee forest for a few days, leaving me and our old lab mix, Ranger, to hold down the house. I never minded. I liked the solitude, the chance to read late with a glass of wine, bake something without little hands sneaking dough, sleep diagonally across the bed. That particular weekend in early October, the leaves were just starting to turn, air crisp enough for a fire but not yet biting. They left Friday afternoon, Caleb waving his new fishing rod out the window until the truck vanished down the switchbacks. I stood on the porch a minute longer, listening to the engine fade, then went inside to the sudden stillness. Ranger followed me room to room, nails clicking on the hardwood, like he was making sure everything was still where it belonged. We'd kept the baby monitor long after Caleb outgrew the need for it. It was one of those old audio-only sets, transmitter in his room, receiver downstairs on the kitchen counter. I meant to pack it away a dozen times, but somehow it stayed plugged in, gathering dust in the spare room we used for storage. That first night alone, I made a pot of soup, put on some music low, and settled into the couch with a book. Around 10 o'clock, the house was cooling fast, so I banked the fire and headed toward the stairs. As I passed the kitchen counter, the monitor crackled, sharp static that made me jump. Then a low murmur filtered through, indistinct words overlapping like someone tuning a radio. I stopped and stared at it. We're miles from any real signal up here. Sometimes you catch snippets of truckers on CB or a distant AM preacher, but nothing clear. I figured interference from a passing storm front, turned the volume knob down, and went to bed. I woke sometime past midnight to Ranger growling low beside the bed, the kind of rumble he saves for strangers at the gate. I sat up, heart already racing, and heard it again, static from downstairs, then that same murmuring voice. Softer this time, almost conversational. I slipped out of bed, pulled on Travis's flannel robe, and padded down the stairs. Ranger stayed close, ears forward. The receiver glowed faintly on the counter. I turned the volume up just enough to hear. The voice rose and fell, words still garbled, but the tone was gentle, like someone telling a bedtime story. Then, clear as anything, a small laugh, high childlike, the kind Caleb makes when he's trying not to get caught being silly. My stomach dropped. Caleb was 20 miles away in a tent by a lake. I stared at the monitor a long moment, then clicked it off. Silence rushed back in. Ranger relaxed, circled twice, and flopped down by the hearth. I told myself it was a fluke, some weird bounce off the mountains, a neighbor's kid on the same frequency, though we don't have neighbors close enough for that. I left the monitor off and went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. I kept hearing that little laugh in my head. Saturday passed slow and golden. I hiked the ridge trail behind the house, picked the last of the blackberries, baked a pie that filled the place with cinnamon smell. By evening, the temperature dropped sharp, so I built a bigger fire and curled up with the same book. Around 9, the monitor crackled again. I'd plugged it back in out of habit when I was cleaning. I reached to turn it off, but paused. The murmuring was back, clearer now. 2 voices, maybe one lower, soothing, the other higher, responding. Words still hard to make out, but the rhythm felt like a conversation. Ranger lifted his head from the rug and growled toward the speaker. I muted it, unplugged the whole thing, and set on a high shelf in the pantry. Told myself that was that. But later, lying in bed with the window cracked to let in the cold air, I heard it anyway. Faint whispers drifting down through the floor vents. Same cadence, same overlapping voices. One calling, the other answering. I sat up, straining to listen. The vents run straight up from the spare room to our bedroom for heat circulation. The sound seemed to come from that empty space above the hallway. Ranger was at the bedroom door now, hackles raised, staring down the dark hall. I pulled on socks and a sweater, grabbed the big flashlight from the nightstand, and went to check. The spare room was cold, moonlight striping the floor through half-closed blinds. Boxes of old toys, holiday decorations, Caleb's outgrown clothes stacked along one wall. Nothing moved. I opened the closet, empty. Checked the small attic hatch in the ceiling, still latched from last winter. No dust disturbed, no animal smells. The whispers had stopped the moment I opened the door. I stood there a minute, flashlight beams sweeping corners, then closed the room up and went back to bed. Ranger followed reluctantly, kept watch from the doorway the rest of the night. Sunday morning, I woke to birdsong and weak sunlight. Made coffee, took Ranger for a long walk down the Forest Service Road, trying to shake the unease. Told myself I was jumping at shadows, missing my boys more than I wanted to admit. That night, I left every light on downstairs, played music louder than usual, anything to fill the quiet. Around 11, I was dozing on the couch when the whispers started again. This time not through vents or monitor, but seemingly from the walls themselves. Soft, persistent. I sat up slowly. The voice was clearer than ever, low and maternal, saying fragments I could almost catch. "Come here, safe now." Then the child's voice, giggling softly. My name slipped through once, gentle, like someone calling me from the top of the stairs. "Laura." Ranger went rigid, a long growl rumbling out of him as he faced the staircase. I stood, legs shaky, and called up, "Who's there?" My voice cracked in the empty house. Nothing answered. The whispers faded the instant I spoke. I checked every room again, closet, under beds, even the crawl space access in the laundry room. Found nothing but cold air and dust. When I came back downstairs, Ranger was still staring up the stairs, refusing to settle. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the kitchen with all the lights blazing, coffee going cold in front of me, shotgun from the gun cabinet across my lap, though I've never fired it. The whispers came and went in waves, sometimes through the vents, sometimes seeming to drift down the hallway from the spare room. Always the same two voices, the soft, coaxing adult and the child responding. Once, clear as day, the child's voice said, "Mama," in a questioning lilt that made my blood run cold. Ranger growled every time, but never barked, just watched tense. Dawn finally crept in, gray and slow. I must have dozed in the chair because the crunch of tires on gravel woke me mid-morning. Travis's truck pulled up, Caleb spilling out first, filthy and grinning, yelling about the fish he caught. Travis followed, unloading gear, calling out that they'd come home early because rain was moving in. The house filled instantly with their voices, their footsteps, the smell of campfire smoke on their clothes. Ranger greeted them like he'd been alone for months. The whispers never came back. Not that night, not any night since when the house is full. We've had plenty of quiet evenings with just the three of us. Holidays, storms that knock the power out. Normal life. But I packed the monitor away for good, sealed in a box in the shed. And on the rare weekends when Travis and Caleb head out without me, I find excuses to visit my sister down in LJ or turn on every light and radio in the place. Because I can't shake the feeling that those voices weren't broadcasting from far away. They were already here, waiting in the empty rooms for the house to go quiet enough to be heard. Waiting for the nights when it's just one person moving around downstairs, someone they could call by name. And some evenings when the wind dies and the owls go still, I swear I catch the faintest murmur drifting down the hallway, patient, listening for my reply. Story 8. My family's cabin sits on a steep slope in the Tennessee Blue Ridge Mountains, just outside Townsend, where the road turns to gravel and the trees close in tight. It's one of those old places pieced together over decades. Log walls chinked with cement, a tin roof that pops in the heat, and a fieldstone foundation high enough on the downhill side to leave a crawl space underneath big enough to stand in if you hunch. We've always used it for storage. Holiday decorations, canning jars, extra furniture, Dad's old tools. The access hatch is inside the downstairs hall closet, a square plywood panel with a rusty handle, set into the floor behind the winter coats. As kids, we hated going in there. The air was damp and earthy, the dirt floor uneven, and the single bulb on a pull string barely cut the dark. I'd always hurry, grab whatever Mom sent me for, get out fast, half convinced something was watching from the deeper shadows under the bedrooms. I was 24 that Memorial Day weekend, home from my apartment in Knoxville, while my parents drove to Alabama for my cousin's wedding. They'd be gone 4 days, Friday to Monday, and asked if I'd mind keeping an eye on the place, water the porch flowers, make sure the pipes didn't burst if a late frost hit. I jumped at it. A long weekend alone in the mountains sounded perfect. No work emails, no roommates blasting music, just quiet and the smell of pine through open windows. I packed light, stopped for groceries in Maryville, and pulled up to the cabin late Friday afternoon with the sun already slipping behind the ridge. The first day and night passed easy. I unpacked the cooler, grilled a steak on the back deck, sat on the porch swing with a beer watching the lightning bugs come out over the meadow. The cabin creaked and settled around me like always, familiar sounds that felt comforting after the city. I went to bed early, windows cracked to let in the cool air, and slept hard under the old quilt my grandmother made. It was Saturday night, or really early Sunday morning, when I first heard it. I'd stayed up late watching an old movie on the little TV in the living room, volume low, so I could hear the crickets outside. Around 1 a.m., I turned everything off and headed to bed upstairs. Halfway up the stairs, I paused. There was a faint dragging sound from below, like something heavy being pulled slowly across dirt. Scratch, pause, scratch. It stopped the second my foot hit the next step. I stood still, listening. The house went quiet again, except for the tick of the kitchen clock drifting up the stairwell. I figured a possum or raccoon had found a way under the foundation. Happened sometimes, and went on to bed. Told myself I'd check in the morning. Sleep came slow after that. I kept hearing things, soft thumps, the occasional scrape. But every time I sat up and listened hard, it stopped. Around 3, I finally drifted off. Sunday morning was bright and warm. I brewed coffee on the stove, took a mug out to the deck, and watched mist burn off the valley. After breakfast, I pulled on old jeans and a flannel, grabbed the flashlight, and opened the hall closet. The crawl space hatch was just as I'd left it. Handle down, no scratches around the edges. I tugged it open, the hinges groaning, and shone the light in. Damp earth smell rolled out, cool and heavy. The dirt floor looked undisturbed at first glance. Same scattered leaves blown in from last fall, same stacks of boxes along the low walls. I crawled in a few feet, beams sweeping the space under the living room. Nothing moved. No animal droppings, no chewed wiring. I backed out, latched the hatch, and forgot about it. Spent the day hiking the trail to the overlook, grilling burgers, reading on the porch until dusk. That second night, the sounds came back stronger. I was downstairs in the living room again, half dozing in the recliner with the lamp on low, when the dragging started slow, deliberate, directly under my feet. Scratch, pause, long scrape, like burlap or heavy cloth being pulled across the ground. I froze, book forgotten in my lap. It kept going, rhythmic, moving from the far end of the crawl space toward the center of the house. Then it stopped. Dead silence. I waited, barely breathing. When I shifted in the chair, it started again, fainter, retreating. Every time I moved, it paused. Every time I held still, it resumed. Patient, listening. I got up slowly and stood in the middle of the room, listening to the floorboards under the rug. The dragging circled now, slow loops under the living room and kitchen. Then a new sound, heavy breathing, low and labored, like someone who'd been exerting themselves. It came from right beneath where I stood, muffled through the boards, but unmistakable. And out, wet and ragged. My skin crawled. I backed away toward the hallway, and the breathing stopped instantly. I didn't go to bed that night. Grabbed the flashlight again and opened the closet. The hatch was still latched, but when I pulled it open, the air that rolled out felt warmer than before, almost humid. I shone the light in. The dirt was disturbed. Long drag marks leading from the far corner toward the center, ending in what looked like handprints. Wide, splayed, fingers pressed deep as if someone had been pulling themselves along on their belly. The prints disappeared into the darker section under the stairs where the light didn't reach well. I stared a long minute, heart hammering, then closed the hatch and dragged the heavy oak dresser from the guest room across the floor to block it. The wood scraped loud across the pine boards. Whatever was down there went still. I called my buddy Ryan, who lives 20 minutes down the mountain. Told him I thought an animal was trapped under the house. Asked if he'd come sit with me a while. He didn't ask questions, just said he'd be over in 30. While I waited, I paced the living room, shotgun from the cabinet across my arm, though I've never been comfortable with it. The sounds didn't start again. When Ryan pulled up, headlights cutting through the dark, everything stayed quiet. We sat up until dawn drinking coffee, talking about nothing important, him pretending he believed my animal story. He left when the sun came up, said call if it got worse. Monday morning, I checked the crawl space one last time before my parents were due back. Pushed the dresser aside, opened the hatch. Fresh prints, clearer now, deeper, led from the center out toward the far foundation vent, then back again. Drag marks between them like whatever it was had gone out and returned. The dirt was packed down in one spot, almost like a nest. I latched the hatch, shoved the dresser back, and didn't open it again. My parents got home that afternoon, tired from the drive, full of stories about the wedding and relatives I hadn't seen in years. I helped unload the car, hugged them, said everything had been fine, never mentioned the sounds, the prints, the night I didn't sleep. Dad checked the crawl space a week later for a leaky pipe and said he didn't see anything unusual, just normal settling dirt. I nodded and changed the subject. I still go up to the cabin, family holidays, long weekends, but I never stay alone if I can help it. And when the house is full and conversation quiets late at night, I catch myself listening for that slow drag under the floorboards, the heavy breathing that always knew exactly where I stood. Whatever was down there never tried to force the hatch. It didn't need to. It waited until the house held only one set of footsteps overhead, then made sure I knew it was there, listening, moving things around, settling in. Some nights I wonder if it's still under there, patient in the dark, waiting for the next time the voices upstairs go quiet and only one person moves from room to room. Because I get the feeling it wasn't looking for a way out. It was making itself at home. Story 9. My home sits high on a knob overlooking a deep valley in the Virginia Blue Ridge Mountains, just west of Bedford where the pavement ends and the forest takes over. It's the house my wife Jenna and I built ourselves 15 years ago. Timber frame, wraparound porch, big windows facing the drop-off so we can watch storms roll in from miles away. On clear days, the view stretches forever, ridge after ridge fading to blue haze. But when the fog comes, and it comes often, especially in late fall, it swallows everything. The valley fills first, then creeps up the slopes like slow water until the house feels like it's floating alone in a gray sea. No close neighbors, no cell service most evenings, just the sound of wind in the hemlocks and the occasional distant bark of a fox. We love it that way. Or we did. That Christmas week a few years back, Jenna took the kids, Emma and little Luke, down to her parents' place in Roanoke for the holidays. Her mom hadn't been feeling well, and they wanted to spend extra time. I had deadlines piling up for a big project, so I stayed behind with promises to drive down Christmas Eve. They left on a Tuesday morning, the car loaded with presents and cookies, kids waving out the windows until they disappeared down the switchbacks. I stood on the porch longer than usual, watching the empty road, then went inside to the quiet that settled heavier than I expected. The first couple of days were productive. I worked at the big oak table by the windows, coffee keeping me going, breaks taken on the porch to split firewood or just breathe the cold air. Evenings I cooked simple, steak on the cast iron, baked potato, a glass of bourbon by the fire. Nights were cold enough that I kept the wood stove fed, windows glowing against the dark. Fog rolled in both nights, thick and silent, turning the outside lights into hazy halos. I went to bed early, slept hard, woke to clear mornings with frost on the grass. It was Thursday evening when I first saw the lights. I'd finished work around 6, made supper, and was washing dishes at the sink when the fog started moving in again. Slow at first, then faster, pouring over the ridge like milk. I turned off the kitchen light to watch it better, standing at the window with a dish towel still in my hand. That's when I noticed them, faint glows down in the trees, low to the ground, bobbing gently as they moved. At first I thought car headlights far below on some Forest Service road I didn't know about, but there are no roads down there, just steep wilderness dropping into the national forest. The lights were too small for headlights anyway, soft and yellow like old lanterns, flickering slightly as they weave between trunks. I dried my hands and stepped out onto the porch, breath fogging in the cold. The glows were distant still, maybe 200 yards out, moving parallel to the slope. 3 of them, no, for spaced unevenly, rising and falling with the terrain. No sound carried up, no voices, no footsteps crunching leaves, nothing but the soft hush of fog against branches. I watched until they faded into the mist, figuring hikers with headlamps or maybe poachers checking traps. Strange time of year for it, but people do odd things in these mountains. That night, I built a bigger fire and left the porch light on, half expecting to hear a knock or see someone emerge from the trees needing help. Nothing came. I went to bed around 11, windows cracked as always, and slept with the stove still ticking downstairs. Friday, I worked through the morning, took a long hike in the afternoon once the fog burned off. The ground was wet, leaves slick underfoot, but no sign of anyone passing, no boot prints, no broken branches. By evening, the fog returned thicker than before, earlier too, swallowing the valley by 5 o'clock. I grilled chicken on the cover part of the deck, smoke mixing with the mist, then settled inside with the curtains open so I could watch the weather move. Around 8, the lights appeared again. Closer this time, maybe 100 yards out, still low, still bobbing as they advanced through the trees. 5 now, I counted, spread in a loose arc that seemed to follow the contour of the slope toward the house. They didn't hurry, just steady, deliberate progress, flickering like flame rather than battery light. I turned off the living room lamps and stood at the big window, hands pressed to the cold glass. The fog glowed faintly around each light, giving just enough shape to see they were moving in my direction. My heart picked up speed. I told myself it was searchers, maybe someone lost down in the valley, rangers or volunteers looking for a hiker. But no one had reported anyone missing that I'd heard on the radio, and search parties don't move silent like that. No calls, no dogs, no flashlights sweeping wide. Just those steady lanterns coming closer. They reached the edge of the clearing around 9. Close enough now that I could see the glow reflect off wet trunks of the tree line. They stopped there, hovering maybe knee-high off the ground, spread in a semicircle facing the house. No figures visible carrying them, just the lights themselves, flickering softly as if breathing. I killed every inside light, so I could see better, stood motionless in the dark living room. The glows didn't advance farther. They waited, swaying slightly, like people shifting weight. Hours passed that way. I sat on the couch with a clear view out the window, shotgun from the cabinet across my lap, though I didn't really know why. The lights held position, occasionally dimming or brightening, one drifting a few feet left or right before settling again. No sound reached the house, no voices calling my name, no footsteps on the wet grass, just presence, watching. Around 2 in the morning, the fog thinned a little on a breeze, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes, tall, thin silhouettes behind the glows, but when I leaned closer the mist closed in again and they were gone. I dozed once or twice in the chair, jerking awake each time, certain they'd moved nearer. They hadn't, still at the tree line, patient. Dawn came slow and gray. The fog lifted in patches as light strengthened, and one by one the glows faded until nothing remained but wet trees and empty clearing. I stepped outside in my boots, breath clouding, and walked the perimeter. The ground was soft from days of damp. No footprints, no lantern oil, no sign anything heavier than deer had crossed the grass. Just a few scattered leaves stuck to the porch steps. I told myself it was over. Drank coffee strong, worked through the morning, tried to focus. But by late afternoon, the fog rolled back and heavier than ever, earlier than before. I closed the curtains this time, kept lights on inside, radio playing low. Around 7:30, I couldn't resist. I parted the fabric just enough to peek. They were back, closer, maybe 50 yards out now. Same 5 lights, same silent drifting. They moved in that slow arc again, tighter this time, until they stopped just beyond where the porch light reached. Waiting, I let the curtain fall and backed away, heart hammering. Sat in the kitchen with my back to the wall, listening for any sound outside. Nothing. I didn't sleep. Kept every light burning, stove crank high. Around midnight, I heard the faintest rustle, like fabric brushing wet leaves, directly under the living room window. Then silence again. I didn't look out. Saturday morning, I packed in a hurry. Left dishes in the sink, fire banked low, note on the counter saying work emergency. Drove down a mountain faster than I should have, hands wide on the wheel, checking the rear view for lights that weren't there. Made it to Roanoke by early afternoon, hugged my family tighter than usual, told Jenna I'd finished the project early and couldn't stand another night without them. We've been back to the house plenty since. Summers, holidays, long weekends. The view is still beautiful, the quiet's still deep. But I've never stayed alone again, not even one night. And when the fog rolls in thick on cool evenings, I close the curtains early, keep the outside lights off, and make sure every room has someone in it. Because I can't shake the memory of those lanterns waiting at the edge of the clearing, patient, searching. They never crossed into the yard, never called out, just watched the house until dawn, night after night, as if waiting for the right moment, or the right person alone, to come closer. Some evenings when the mist rises and the valley disappears, I catch myself listening for that soft rustle at the tree line, wondering if they're still out there in the fog. Lights low, moving slow, looking for the next time the windows glow with only one shadow inside.